They say the most sacred things happen behind closed doors. But what if I told you that one of the most intimate acts we perform, something shared between lovers, partners, and even spouses, might be something God never intended? Something that, according to certain interpretations, goes against divine design, yet it happens in millions of homes every single night. This isn't about judgment, it's about uncovering hidden truths buried in scripture and obscured by tradition. What if an act we've been told is pure and loving is, in some eyes, spiritually dangerous? Today, we're diving into ancient texts, forgotten history, and spiritual mysteries that challenge our deepest assumptions. By the end of this video, you may never see this act or your relationship the same way again. If this kind of content speaks to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a revelation. And tell us in the comments, do you believe there are divine limits on physical intimacy? Let's begin by stepping into the world of sacred texts, where desire and discipline are often at odds. From the earliest passages of Scripture, intimacy was never just about pleasure, it was about purpose. In the book of Genesis, the first mention of union between man and woman isn't merely biological. It's described as a fusion, a becoming of one flesh. And that phrase, one flesh, is packed with spiritual significance. But here's the problem. Over the centuries, the spiritual essence of this union has been diluted, commodified, and twisted by both religious authorities and cultural evolution. So now we must ask, when two people lie together in what they call love, are they always walking within God's blessing, or sometimes stepping into something darker? You see, there are interpretations, ancient, rare, and often silenced, that suggest not all physical acts between consenting partners are sanctioned. In fact, some acts, even within marriage, were considered forbidden by certain sects of early Christianity, Judaism, and even within Islamic mysticism. Not because of prudishness or oppression, but because these acts were believed to desecrate what was meant to be holy. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a couple, married for years, secure in their love and trust. Their bedroom is a sanctuary, or at least they believe it is. But one night, guided by curiosity or inspired by something they read or watched, they try something new. It's intimate, it's intense, and to them it feels natural. But what if, spiritually speaking, they've crossed an invisible line? What if that act, though consensual and desired, is a violation not of each other, but of a divine boundary? A boundary many never even knew existed. Now let's bring in the voices of the ancients. The early church fathers, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Tertullian, spoke often of the purpose of intimacy. They weren't just theologians, they were spiritual anatomists, dissecting desire to its core. For them, sex wasn't about expression, it was about sanctification. They believed its primary purpose was procreation within divine order. Anything beyond that, especially acts that were solely for pleasure or considered unnatural, was labeled sin. And not just sin, but rebellion. Rebellion against the Creator's intention. But here's where it gets controversial. What exactly were those forbidden acts, and are they still forbidden today? Some interpretations go as far as condemning specific positions, practices, or even frequencies of intimacy. Others point to ancient rabbinical texts that describe certain acts, even within marriage, as spiritually defiling. The Talmud contains debates among sages about what is permissible, what is shameful, and what constitutes sacred union versus animalistic behavior. But before we go further, let's be clear. This isn't about shaming anyone. This is about awakening. This is about inviting you to question the rituals you've inherited, the acts you've never questioned, the desires you've always assumed were harmless. And in that questioning, perhaps find a path back to something purer, deeper, and divinely inspired. One of the most profound insights comes from the Kabbalistic traditions, Jewish mysticism. In their view, sexual union is a reflection of the divine union between masculine and feminine energies, known as the merging of Zir Anpin and Nukva. But here's the catch, that union must be balanced, intentional, and directed toward spiritual elevation. When the act becomes purely carnal, when it loses its conscious, sacred focus, it becomes a distortion, a theft of divine energy. Some Kabbalists even warn that improper intimacy can attract klipot, spiritual husks or dark energies that cling to the soul and cause chaos in one's life. Think about that for a moment. Could it be that some of the misfortunes, emotional heaviness, or spiritual confusion you experience are not just random trials, but consequences of intimate acts performed without alignment? Could there be a hidden cost to pleasure when it's divorced from purpose? Now you might be wondering, how are we supposed to know what's allowed and what's not? The truth is, there's no universal list. That's what makes this so complicated and so urgent to explore. In Christianity, especially in the mystic traditions like Gnosticism and certain early ascetic movements, there was an idea that even within marriage, sex was a concession, not a command. The Apostle Paul said it plainly, "It is good for a man not to touch a woman." And when he did allow it, it was to avoid burning with lust, not to celebrate love. But then, centuries later, the church began to relax these views, emphasizing marriage as a sacred bond that included sexual union. Still, echoes of the earlier caution remain. Even today, some religious groups teach that specific acts, particularly those considered unnatural or imitative of animal behavior, should be avoided, as they are believed to grieve the Holy Spirit. And here's where we get to the heart of it. What if the intimacy that happens every night in millions of homes isn't neutral? What if, in the unseen realm, there's an impact, a spiritual residue? Could it be that some of us are unknowingly weakening our spiritual armor with acts that feel right, but are deeply wrong? This might explain why some people feel disconnected from their faith, even when they pray daily and attend services. There's a hidden guilt, a spiritual interference, a sense of distance from the divine they can't explain. And perhaps it's not their belief system, it's their bedroom. Before you get defensive, pause. Reflect. This isn't about accusing you. This is about inviting you into a deeper awareness. Because if you truly believe your body is a temple, shouldn't every act you perform with it be an act of worship? Now let's talk about modern culture. It bombards us with messages that say, do what feels good, explore everything. There are no limits as long as it's consensual. But spirituality has never been about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's holy. And holiness isn't just about rituals or rules, it's about alignment with a higher will. So the question becomes, is your intimacy aligned with divine purpose or just personal pleasure? Let me ask you something. Do you think God has boundaries for love? Or is everything permitted as long as it's done in love? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might be the spark someone else needs. And while you're here, take a moment to like this video. If this topic is stirring something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let's journey deeper together. And hey, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Your city, your country, your spiritual path. It all matters. Let's build this community with curiosity and courage. Let's take a step back in time, not just decades or centuries, but millennia. In the ancient world, intimacy was often seen not as a private affair, but a sacred rite. In temples across Sumer, Babylon, and Egypt, physical union was sometimes even a part of religious ritual. But over time, what was once revered became regulated. And in that regulation, lines were drawn, some clear, some cloaked in symbolism. You see, there's a reason why so many religious traditions place such heavy emphasis on purity. Not just physical purity, but spiritual cleanliness. The idea wasn't to control people's bodies, but to protect their souls. Many believed that the body could be a gateway for divine energy, or for spiritual contamination. What enters the body, what it does, how it moves, these were not casual concerns. They were pathways, either toward light or shadow. In the writings of the Desert Fathers, early Christian mystics who withdrew into the wilderness to seek God in silence, there are chilling accounts of how certain desires were seen not as mere temptations, but as demonic whispers. One monk writes about being plagued at night by visions and urges that pulled him away from his contemplative state. He believed these weren't just thoughts, they were spiritual attacks triggered by past indulgence. Now, before we dismiss this as outdated mysticism, let's ask a hard question. Have you ever felt a deep disconnection after an act of intimacy? A sudden wave of sadness, confusion, or guilt that didn't make sense in the moment? Some say that's just biology, a crash in chemicals. But what if, just what if, it's something deeper, something spiritual? There's a concept in both Eastern and Western esoteric teachings that sexual energy is life force energy, what the Chinese call qi, the Hindus prana, and what mystics might call the divine current. When it's honored, channeled, and sacred, it brings vitality and clarity. But when it's wasted, exploited, or misused, it can deplete you, even destroy your spiritual sensitivity. In Tantra, for example, yes, real Tantra, not the version popularized in modern self-help books, there is great reverence for sexual union, but only within precise spiritual boundaries. It's not about pleasure for pleasure's sake. It's about union with the divine. Every breath, every movement, every touch must be conscious. Anything done mechanically or for raw stimulation is seen as falling into tamas, the state of spiritual ignorance. So what does that mean for us? It means that every night, countless people might be engaging in something profoundly intimate, but completely disconnected from spirit. And the consequences of that disconnection might be showing up in their emotional lives, their relationships, even their health. Let's go deeper. The Zohar, one of the foundational texts of Kabbalistic mysticism, warns of what happens when intimacy is stripped of holiness. It describes certain acts that release spiritual sparks, but also attract dark forces when not done in purity. In one section, it warns men not to emit seed in vain, a metaphor for misdirected desire, disconnected from its higher purpose. That warning wasn't just about reproduction, it was about the fragmentation of soul energy, a tearing away of divine unity. In Islamic Sufism, there is a parallel idea. The body is seen as a sacred trust, and desire as a flame. That flame can illuminate the path or burn the house down. In the writings of Al-Ghazali, he speaks of the subtle balance between fulfilling one's marital rights and falling into nafs, the ego's hunger for gratification. When desire rules, God is veiled. When discipline reigns, the soul ascends. Think about that. How many people today are trapped in routines of physical intimacy that leave them emptier than before? They love their partner, they want connection, but something feels off. Something is missing. Could it be that the act itself has become hollow, stripped of sacredness, reduced to physicality? We live in a culture obsessed with technique, novelty, and intensity. But what if we've lost the very soul of intimacy? What if, in chasing pleasure, we've exiled purpose? That's why so many people today are confused. Not just about sex, but about love, commitment, even self-worth. Because when the sacred is removed from the sensual becomes chaotic. This is why the question must be asked: are we honoring God in the way we unite with another person? Not just emotionally, not just legally through marriage, but spiritually, energetically, divinely. Let's be even more honest. There are acts, specific, modern, widely accepted acts that ancient traditions explicitly warned against. Acts that were seen as defiling the inner temple of the soul. Today, we might laugh at those warnings, call them outdated. But is it possible that our spiritual confusion, our emotional instability, even some relational breakdowns are the echo of those very ignored boundaries? Some might ask, but if we love each other, doesn't that make it holy? Love is powerful, but it's not a license. There are things done in love that can still hurt, still corrupt, still distance us from God. That's a hard truth. One we don't like to face, but facing it might just be the beginning of real spiritual healing. And let's not forget, this conversation isn't about repressing desire, it's about redeeming it, reclaiming its sacred role in our lives. Because when intimacy is holy, it transforms, it heals, it uplifts. But when it's misused, it leaves us hollow, confused, disconnected, not just from others, but from ourselves. Imagine this. A couple deciding together to sanctify their intimacy, not with rigid rules, but with spiritual awareness. They pause before union. They breathe. They invite divine presence. They align their hearts. And in that space, what once was merely physical becomes transcendent. That's what we've lost. And that's what we're being called to rediscover. So, how do we begin? First, by asking ourselves hard questions. Not with shame, but with courage. What are our motives? What are our habits? Are we truly present in these moments or just performing a routine? Is there prayer, intention, sacredness, or just gratification? And second, by remembering this, you are not just flesh, you are spirit. Every part of you, including your desires, is meant to reflect the divine. That doesn't mean denying pleasure, it means elevating it, infusing it with love, purpose, and sacred awareness. Before we continue, let's pause and reflect. Has anything you've heard so far stirred something within you? Maybe a memory, maybe a question, maybe even a resistance. That's okay. This is not about easy answers. This is about deep transformation. And the first step is awareness. If this message is resonating with you, please like the video. It helps us reach more people who need this truth. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications. We have so much more to explore. And I'd love to know, do you think intimacy has a divine blueprint, or is it something we're meant to define for ourselves? Let's talk about it in the comments. Every perspective adds depth. Every voice matters. So where does this leave us? At a crossroads. One road continues the path most of us have been walking, where intimacy is private, unexamined, and mostly driven by emotion or instinct. The other invites us into something rare, sacred awareness. But let's be honest, choosing the sacred path isn't easy. It means confronting truths that can shake the foundations of how we love, how we connect, and how we understand ourselves. Let's return to the idea of boundaries, not as restrictions, but as protection. In ancient Hebrew culture, boundaries weren't limitations, they were blessings. A boundary marked the edge of something holy. Crossing it without permission wasn't just rebellion, it was desecration. Now apply that to the most intimate moments between two people. When a spiritual boundary is crossed, knowingly or unknowingly, it can lead to subtle spiritual erosion. At first you might not even notice, but over time it adds up. You start to feel disconnected, unfulfilled, confused about your desires, or even emotionally numb. Could it be that this is the price of intimacy without alignment? Let's go deeper still. There's an old teaching in the mystical branches of early Christianity and Judaism that every act of physical union creates a spiritual imprint, not just on your soul, but in the unseen world around you. Some mystics believe these imprints, if created in impurity, can follow a person for years. They become part of your spiritual atmosphere. That heaviness you sometimes feel for no reason, that fog you can't shake, it might not be psychological. It might be spiritual residue from acts that lacked divine harmony. And this doesn't only apply to people outside of marriage. Some of the most spiritually misaligned intimacy happens inside committed relationships, when the act becomes mechanical, or worse, manipulative. When it's used to gain control, avoid conflict, or feed emotional needs rather than foster unity. In those cases, marriage is not a shield. It can become a veil hiding deep dysfunction. That's why this message is so critical. It speaks not just to the what, but to the why and how of physical love. Now let's talk about conscience, that subtle voice inside you, the whisper that nudges when something doesn't feel quite right. Maybe you've ignored it, maybe you've silenced it, or maybe you've been told that it's just guilt or programming or cultural baggage. But what if your conscience is more than that? What if it's the echo of divine order within you, calling you back to alignment? Some viewers might be asking, how do I know if something is spiritually off? One way is by looking at the fruit. Does the act bring you and your partner closer in love, respect, peace, and joy? Or does it leave a residue, arguments, distance, shame, or emotional coldness? The fruits don't lie, they reveal the roots. And if the root is self-serving or misaligned, the fruit will always be bitter, even if the moment felt sweet. We also have to address a modern lie, the belief that freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want. But that's not freedom. That's bondage masquerading as liberation. True freedom is the power to choose what uplifts the soul, even when it's not easy, to say no to lower desires in order to say yes to something eternal. And that's where sacred intimacy comes in. It's not about denial, it's about elevation. Let me share a story. A woman once came to a spiritual mentor, broken and confused. She was married to a good man. They had a family, a home, and what looked like a beautiful life. But she confessed that every time they were intimate, she felt sadness afterward. A strange emptiness, not because he mistreated her, or because she didn't love him, but because something in the act felt disconnected from who she truly was. The mentor didn't offer judgment. Instead, he asked her, "Have you ever invited the divine into your bedroom?" She was stunned. "I didn't know I could," she replied. That question changed her life. She began to pray before intimacy, to speak with her husband about their spiritual connection. And slowly, the sadness faded, because they weren't just touching each other anymore. They were touching heaven. That story might resonate with you, or it might challenge you. Either way, it reveals a truth. God is not uninterested in your most intimate moments. He's not hiding from your desires. He's inviting you to bring them to Him, to let Him transform them from mere impulses into sacred rituals. In the early days of the Christian desert movements, there was a saying, "The way you love is the way you worship." That's profound, because it means every act of love, every touch, every gaze, is either lifting your soul or lowering it, either creating light or casting shadow, either honoring the divine or feeding the ego. Now let's address something sensitive, the influence of media. Today, many people, knowingly or not, base their intimate behavior on what they've seen in movies, TV, or explicit content online. These portrayals are designed to stimulate, not sanctify. They feed fantasy, not faith. And when you carry those images into your real-life connections, something breaks. Expectations become distorted, bodies become objects, and the soul is pushed out of the room. If you've ever found yourself comparing your real intimacy to what you've seen on a screen, pause. Ask yourself, where did I learn this behavior? Is this truly me, or is it programming? Because the moment you begin to question, you begin to awaken. And let's not forget trauma. For some, intimacy has been a place of pain, not pleasure, a wound, not a wonder. In those cases, healing must come first, because no sacred connection can thrive on a foundation of unresolved trauma. That's why self-awareness and emotional honesty are so vital. You can't fake divine connection. You can only cultivate it. So where do we go from here? We go inward. We reflect. We examine, not with shame, but with reverence. Ask yourself, is my intimacy rooted in love, truth, and alignment? or in habit, fantasy, and fear? That one question can begin a transformation that ripples into every part of your life. If you're married, consider inviting your partner into this conversation. Watch this video together. Ask hard questions, pray together, explore what sacred intimacy means for you as a couple. It might be uncomfortable at first, but growth always is. And if you're single, this message is just as vital. Because the patterns you build now will shape the intimacy you create later. Don't wait for marriage to honor your body as a temple. Start now. And if you've made mistakes, taken wrong turns, or feel lost in this area, hear this: you are not condemned. You are being called higher. There is grace, there is healing, there is a path back to purity, not the rigid kind, but the radiant kind. The kind that doesn't just avoid sin, but seeks sanctity. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt a spiritual disconnect after intimacy, even when everything seemed normal? Or do you think these ancient teachings are outdated in today's world? Let's talk about it in the comments. Your story might open someone else's eyes. If this video is speaking to your soul, please like it. Share it with someone you trust. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This is more than a conversation. It's a movement back to the sacred. And every voice, every heart, every question matters. As we journey further, we must explore the ripple effect, the unseen consequences that unfold from what many consider private acts. In the physical world, intimacy might last minutes, but in the spiritual realm, its echo can linger for lifetimes. What if the union of two bodies is also the entanglement of two souls? And what if that entanglement, if not handled with reverence, becomes a source of spiritual confusion, even torment? Many spiritual teachers across cultures have spoken about soul ties. You've probably heard the term thrown around casually, especially in self-help or pop psychology circles. But in its original sense, a soul tie isn't just an emotional bond, it's a spiritual tether. When two people become physically one, something deeper than the body is exchanged. And if that exchange is not rooted in divine intention, it can lead to spiritual fragmentation. Have you ever felt haunted by a past partner, not just in your thoughts, but in your energy? Have you ever struggled to connect with your spouse because you're still subconsciously attached to someone else? That might not be mere nostalgia, it might be a lingering soul tie. And the more disordered the act that created it, the more distorted the energy it leaves behind. Some traditions teach that these soul ties can become spiritual strongholds, anchors that hold you back, distort your perceptions, or even influence your choices long after the relationship ends. And here's the hard part: time doesn't always break them. Neither does distance. Only conscious spiritual release can untie what was never meant to be bound. This is why intentionality is everything. In sacred intimacy, nothing is casual. Every word spoken, every movement made carries spiritual weight. That's not meant to burden you, it's meant to awaken you, to bring you into the full power and responsibility of your divine design. There's an old teaching from the early monastics: guard the gates of the senses. This meant more than just avoiding temptation. It was about stewardship. Your eyes, your ears, your mouth, these are gates, but so is your body. When you unite with someone, you're not just opening the physical gate, you're opening your spiritual threshold. And the question becomes, what or who are you letting in? In a world that glorifies casual encounters, hookup culture, and boundaryless expression, this truth feels almost alien. But maybe that's why so many people feel spiritually lost. When you open gates indiscriminately, don't be surprised when you can't find your way back to yourself. And here's something most won't tell you: even within a committed relationship, there can be spiritual contamination. If either partner is carrying unhealed wounds, spiritual residue from past partners, or emotional manipulations cloaked as love, then even their union can become a place of spiritual warfare. That's why spiritual alignment between partners is not just nice, it's essential. Let's talk about alignment. It's one thing to be in love, it's another to be aligned. Love is emotion, alignment is architecture. Love can fade, alignment sustains. When two people are aligned, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, their union becomes a portal, a place where heaven touches earth. But when they're misaligned, that same union becomes a battleground. You might be wondering, how do I know if I'm aligned with my partner? Start with this. Do you grow closer to God after intimacy or further away? Do you feel uplifted or drained? Is there mutual reverence or silent resentment? Your spirit knows the truth, even if your mind tries to justify. In some ancient rituals, couples would fast before union. They would pray, cleanse, and center themselves, not out of superstition, but out of respect. They believed that their act wasn't just personal, it was cosmic. It affected not only them, but their children, their lineage, even the energy of their home. Today, that sounds extreme, but maybe it's time we stop mocking what was sacred and start rediscovering the wisdom we've lost. Because let's face it, modern approaches aren't working. Divorce rates are high. Emotional disconnection is rampant. Even among those who stay together, intimacy often becomes stale, forced, or unfulfilling. Could it be that we've lost our way because we stopped treating the sacred as sacred? Imagine what would happen if more couples treated their intimacy like a sacred ceremony, if they approached each other with awe, respect, and spiritual intention, if they invited the divine into their union, not just once, but every time. That kind of shift wouldn't just change marriages, it would change legacies. And what about those who are single? You're not excluded from this conversation. In fact, you're in the most powerful position of all. You have the chance to lay a foundation of sacredness before anyone else steps into your life, to detox from past entanglements, to build spiritual clarity, to decide now that your body, your heart, your energy will be reserved for someone who honors the temple that you are. This is your season of consecration, not isolation. Consecration, a sacred setting apart, not because you're unworthy, but because you're chosen. And the chosen don't settle for imitation. They wait for what is divine. You might be thinking, but what if I've already crossed boundaries? What if I've already engaged in acts that were spiritually harmful? Here's the good news. There is always redemption. The power of divine forgiveness isn't just to cleanse, it's to realign. But forgiveness must be followed by awareness, by new choices, by sacred intention. You can reclaim your temple. You can untie soul ties. You can cleanse the spiritual residue. You can begin again, but not by accident, only by intention. And that's the heart of this message, sacred intention. Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you prayed about your intimacy? Not just your relationship, your actual intimacy. When was the last time you invited God into the bedroom, into the bed, into the moment? For most people, the answer is never. And yet, we wonder why so many feel spiritually dry in the most passionate parts of their lives. Here's a radical idea. What if the most powerful spiritual breakthroughs aren't found in churches, temples, or retreats, but in your own bedroom? What if reclaiming your spiritual authority starts with sanctifying your intimacy? It's time we start seeing intimacy as spiritual warfare. Because the enemy doesn't just attack through obvious means. He attacks through pleasure without purpose, connection without covenant, desire without discipline. And every time we engage in these acts without sacred awareness, we give away a piece of our power. But you can take it back. You can reclaim your authority, not by rejecting intimacy, but by redeeming it. Before we move on, I want to ask you a deeply personal question. Have you ever felt like something sacred was missing from your most intimate moments? Like your body was present, but your spirit wasn't? I invite you to share in the comments, only if you feel led. Your honesty might inspire someone else to begin their own healing journey. If this message is stirring something inside you, please like the video. It's not about vanity, it's about visibility. The more engagement, the more people this message can reach. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications, because we're building something rare here. A space where intimacy and spirituality are not enemies, but allies. We've come a long way together, through ancient wisdom, spiritual truths, controversial questions, and deep personal reflection. And now, we arrive at the moment that matters most. What do we do with everything we've uncovered? Because this isn't just information, it's an invitation. An invitation to return to what is sacred, to realign our most intimate spaces with divine purpose, to reject the cheap imitations of pleasure that the world offers and rediscover the radiant, transcendent beauty of intimacy that mirrors the divine. The truth is, we were never meant to navigate this part of our lives alone or in the dark. But culture taught us to be silent. Religion often gave us rules, but not revelation. And pain taught us to disconnect. But now, here's a new truth. Your body is not your shame. It is your sanctuary. Your desire is not your enemy. It is your compass, but it must be purified, guided, and aligned. And that starts with a choice, right now. A choice to begin seeing your body, and the body of the one you love, not as an object, but as a living altar. A place where heaven meets earth, a place where love becomes a sacred offering, not a selfish demand. That's the revolution. That's the real freedom. And it's not too late. Not if you've made mistakes, not if you're in a relationship that's struggling, not if your past is filled with choices you regret. Because grace is real. Restoration is possible. But only if you step out of silence and into sacred awareness. So here's the challenge. Start tonight. Not next week. Not when it feels more convenient. Tonight. Take a moment alone or with your partner. Reflect. Pray. Ask the divine to reveal any hidden places in your intimacy that need light. Ask for clarity. Ask for courage. And most importantly, ask for sanctification. Because when you sanctify your intimacy, you don't lose anything. You gain everything. You gain peace, connection, spiritual strength. You gain a kind of unity that no technique, no performance, no physical act alone could ever create. You gain the presence of the divine in the most personal part of your life. You might cry. You might feel resistance. You might even laugh at the idea at first. That's okay. Keep going. Sacred things are often strange at first, but once you taste the depth, the presence, the peace, you'll never want to go back. Imagine a life where intimacy no longer leaves you feeling empty, where you don't have to guess whether you're crossing a line, where your soul, your body, your heart are all speaking the same language: truth, love, alignment. That's not a fantasy, it's the divine design. And it's waiting for you. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. It means you're seeking something real, something deeper, something holy. And I believe, with everything in me, that if you take this message seriously, your life will never be the same. This is more than a video. It's a call to sacred living. So I ask you now, are you ready to transform the most private part of your life into the most powerful place of divine connection? If so, let's walk this journey together. Like this video if it spoke to you. Subscribe to the channel. We are building a space where truth is honored and the soul is fed. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. And please comment below. Share your thoughts, your questions, your doubts. Have you ever experienced a moment of intimacy that felt spiritually out of sync, or one that felt divinely aligned? Your story could be the key that unlocks healing for someone else. We're not here to condemn, we're here to awaken. And awakening always begins with truth, spoken in love. So here it is. You were made for more. Your love life was meant to be holy. Your intimacy was always meant to be sacred. Let's reclaim it, together. Until next time, stay open, stay honest, and above all, stay sacred.